It was the worst nightmare, the worst news that a mother could have gotten, a sister we could have ever faced. We never in our wildest dreams had we thought that calling for help would have led to her death. It's like I couldn't fathom it. It's like I was in disbelief,
On March 15th, 2012, Shauna Francis called 311 for help with getting her little sister Shereese to take her schizophrenia medication. It was something Shereese's family did from time to time when she refused to take her medicine.
So when they came, to my surprise, it wasn't the paramedics who came like before. It was the police officers. 4 officers came and they asked me where she was. And I said, well, she's downstairs. So we went downstairs. She saw them and she was just, who are you? What are you doing here?
Puzzled.
Yes.
Confused.
Yeah, very confused.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe she felt threatened as well because she's someone who's never been, she never did anything. She's never been arrested.
Never got a parking ticket, never been convicted of a crime, never been interactive with any negative, any hostile environment.
No law enforcement whatsoever.
No, nothing, not even an argument with a friend.
Shauna says it should have been clear to officers that they were handling what the NYPD calls an emotionally disturbed person, or EDP, by the way she responded to their commands on the nights cops showed up at the Francis family home.
So she said, what are you doing here? I guess they're telling her, you have to go to the hospital. You have to go to the hospital. She said, I'm not going anywhere. You get out of my house right now. Get out of my house right now. Out. So she started walking to go up the stairs. By the stairs, there is a bed. She went towards the staircase and I heard one of the officers said, don't let her go. Don't let her pass. Don't let her go up the stairs. And then that's when everything turned worse. They tackled her onto the bed. She ended up on the bed. She ended up face down on the bed. And the police officer was on top of her, in her back. But I was pacing back and forth, because I trusted these police officers. I thought they knew what they were doing. So I just kept saying, Shereese, please cooperate with the police officers. They're just trying to help you to get back to the hospital. But they continued with this force, this aggressive force, on top of her. And she was just, screaming, get off of me, get off of me, get off of me. And she's screaming and I'm walking back and forth. And then all of a sudden, there was complete silence in the room. So then I looked and I said, wait, what's going on? She was laying there, just lifeless. They placed her on the ground. They started making a call by radio, but they were talking in police code, which I can't understand. I didn't know what they were saying.
Shauna says at that point, the responding officers told her to leave the basement along with the rest of her family while they performed chest compressions on Shereese.
Hour and a half went by. They're still down there with her. So it was night. All of a sudden we saw them, we were inside, we saw them rushing her on a stretcher coming from the backyard. So they ran her to the ambulance. My mother-in-law ran out. My mother-in-law touched her and she said, wait, but she's cold. And they were like, ma'am, you have to go. So we packed her bags, ready to go to the hospital. So my aunt came with me. We all drove to Jamaica Hospital. And we went into the doors and then they told us, oh, we have to have a word with you. They took us into a room and they said to us, we're sorry, but there's nothing else that we could have done. Your sister is gone.
The medical examiner ruled Shereese's death a homicide, labeling her cause of death as, quote, compression of trunk during agitated violent behavior, schizophrenia, while prone on bed, and attempted restraint by police officers.
how could this have gone so wrong? What kind of protocol does the NYPD have when it comes to dealing with mentally ill people? Because she did have schizophrenia, she was diagnosed with it. And what is that process like?
So a lot of what the police do is so-called EDP calls. At least in New York, that's what we call them. EDP means emotionally disturbed person. I think it's kind of an ugly and reductive term. Shereese was living with mental illness and without violence in her life. In this case, however, unlike prior occasions, police came instead of an ambulance. Now, the police respond to these calls, but it is well known that they don't have the training or expertise, and in many cases, the temperament to deal with an individual who's going through a mental health crisis.
When Inside Edition Digital asked the NYPD about their protocol when it comes to handling EDP calls, they directed us to their patrol guide. It reads in part, quote, "The primary duty of all members of the service is to preserve human life. Deadly physical force will be used only as a last resort to protect the life of the uniformed member of the service assigned or any other person present." The guide then goes into further detail, breaking the protocol down into numbered steps. In October 2019, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced he wanted the language around EDP calls to change, instead naming them mental health calls, and that trained mental health workers would respond to such calls alongside the NYPD.
And the problem in Shereese's case, tragically, was that those officers didn't follow the protocol. It was as clear could be. They just didn't follow it. They didn't want to wait. Their sergeant didn't want to come. And as a result, it very quickly blew up into a confrontation with the police officers telling her, "Shereese, you have to go to the hospital," cornering her in her own room, and her saying, "You get out of here, or I'm going to call the cops on you." That's what Shereese was saying to the police. And that should have, even if they hadn't gotten all of that training, that should have let any reasonable person know that they were dealing with someone who on a certain level was not connected with reality. And that the thing to do was not to challenge her and start chasing her through her own home, but instead to de-escalate, to put some distance between them and her, and to allow people with mental health training to handle the situation. But that didn't happen.
Shauna is 2 years older than Shereese, who was only 29 at the time of her death. Shauna and Shereese's parents moved their family to Jamaica, Queens from Jamaica, West Indies in the 1980s.
Well, it was a big change. Well, of course, when you're down there, you say, oh, the land of opportunity. We think we're coming over to the roads are going to be paved with gold,
Like, I remember jokes when we were young, we used to say green eggs and ham.
She was always this bubbly person. She's so cheerful. She was always putting others before herself. A lot of her friends would tell me, even after her death, they would say, she would call me midnight and to find out how I was doing. And I didn't even know she was doing all of that. And, people always gravitated to her because she had this, just this beautiful smile of hers.
Great aura. She had a funny aura.
Yes,
great
aura. And she was so loving. She's always the one that would say, "Oh, I love you. Are you okay? You sure everything is okay with you?"
She was very magnetic. She can come into a room and light it up. If the room required a 60-watt light bulb, Shereese was the 60-watt light bulb. They were a package. Shauna and Shereese was a package. If you was coming for Shauna, you better be ready to talk to Shereese.
Shauna continues to hold trauma from witnessing her sister's sudden death.
So throughout the case, I think I just went into another world.
You detached. You were going through depression. Because I didn't even get to connect with her as much as I was like, wait a minute, I would check in every once in a while with Miss Aline, her mom, even her, and no one really wanted to, talk about it. So I believe, and I don't know if she's going to admit it, but I believe she was going through a sense of depression, just detaching from anything to deal with Shereese. anything to deal with the crime, the officers, anything. She was just detaching.
Yeah, I definitely was, because I was in my bed for a long time. My father, I couldn't even go to work. He was like, you have to get up, move around. My husband was like, you have to. He actually said that. He said, you're falling into depression right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, at that time, I remember saying to myself, I said, I don't even care if I live right now. So I just suppressed everything. I don't even know the police officers' names. I'm sure everything is there. I don't know. I didn't go digging, asking these questions, because I just couldn't face it. Like, up to now, this is the hardest thing for me, to sit here today before you. It's the first time I've opened up.
At the end of the day, I mean, we didn't get that much evidence out of the police, but everything we got out of them added up to it was the police's fault. And they didn't follow the rules they were supposed to follow. And Shereese had died as a result. And it ended up becoming a negotiation over a very large sum of money that would be paid to the family. And ultimately, I think the family just wanted to move on. And, we had tried to use it as a teaching moment. If you look and do a search, you'll see that we were out there in front of One Police Plaza holding multiple demonstrations for police accountability at the time, trying to get the police to open up about their sources of information and evidence.
Inside Edition Digital reached out to the NYPD in regards to Shereese's case. They confirm all of the cops involved in the incident are still active members of the force. They would not specify in what capacity, and told us to file a Freedom of Information request, or FOIL, in order to obtain their background information and to find out what, if any, disciplinary action was ever taken against those officers in Shereese's case or in others. We did. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, FOIL requests are backlogged, and that information will not be available until at least the end of the year. In June, New York Governor Cuomo signed a historic bill into law repealing 50A, which bans chokeholds and now allows police misconduct records to be revealed to the public. However, a separate website called Capstat, which began as a demonstration project, collected data from several sources. Payroll information from New York City's open data portal, FOIL, reports of disciplinary summaries, and federal lawsuits filed in New York's southern and eastern districts from January 2015 through June 2018. According to Capstat, one of the officers was named in a 2014 lawsuit claiming he was one of the cops who assaulted a man after a traffic stop. That case was settled with the city for $145,000. That same officer was also named in another lawsuit, where that case was settled for $16,500. 2 others have since been promoted to sergeant, and another was moved to the mounted unit. None of the officers turned up in a new database published by ProPublica, which is comprised of complaints from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, or CCRB, an organization that investigates allegations of police misconduct. Inside Edition Digital also reached out to the Sergeant Benevolent Association, Police Benevolent Association, and the CCRB for comments. The CCRB was the only one of those agencies to reply. They said in part, quote, "We are currently barred from sharing this information even through FOIL due to ongoing litigation around what information we can release. But I can assure you we will work on it in the meantime and release it when it is legally acceptable to do so."
I know what George Floyd family's going through, Eric Garner. My silence is not going to make a difference. I need to speak up now.
What does justice for Shereese look like now?
Well, justice for Shereese looks like the Shereese Francis Act being passed. That is a bill that Shauna and I have come together to write. It would change the narrative of how police officers are engaging with mentally ill people, period.
So we tell them, we are the people, we are the people.
We don't want any more knees in the back. We're sick of it.
We want to see my sister's death was not taken in vain. We want to see something good come out. If I could ask her right now, Shereese, what would you want done? She would say, make a difference.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Stephanie Officer.